Hello, my name is Marcelo Freitas and this is a series of videos in which I defend the preservation of the text of the New Testament using the line of transmission of Family 35. In this video, we want to explain the question: are the oldest manuscripts the best manuscripts? For a better understanding of the topic, we need to divide in two questions. What is the logic behind saying that older is equal to better? And the second question is, how the older manuscripts managed to survive, how they managed to resist the action of time. On the first point, to say that older is better, an analogy was made with a river and its source. The closer to the source, the purer the water in that river should be. This analogy was used with the manuscripts. The source would be the original text, and the oldest manuscripts, being closer to the source, should be the best. Based on this reasoning, any old fragment made by someone we don't know would have a very heavy weight, since it will be close to the source. Notice, therefore, that the important thing is the determining of the date, of the age of the document, the quality of the text. What is written in the document is not taken into account. There is no objective basis for saying that the quality of the manuscript is good. By this, we mean that in practice, in reality, all old documents are very different, with very different wording, but even so, they are called better just because they are old documents. The application of this logic in the attempt to reconstruct the New Testament was historically popularized by Hort. But let's go to the second point. How could a manuscript survive for 1500 years? How could a manuscript be old and still have a good text? We know from experience that books that are used, they wear out. They just can't resist the action of time. So the manuscripts that lasted 1500 years must not have been used, since books were expensive and hard to obtain in those years. Had they been of acceptable quality, they would have been used and worn out. So we may conclude that people refused to use them because of their poor quality text. Of the two materials that they had in those days, papyrus and leather, parchment, papyrus was cheaper and more easily available, but it is also very fragile, which is why no large Bible book written on papyrus has survived. Leather was better, but in a wetter climate, it would be easily attacked by insects and mold. So let's explain two reasons to clarify why only manuscripts in Egypt have survived the action of time for 14 centuries. First reason: only manuscripts buried in dry and hot places, such as the desert sands in Egypt, would withstand the action of time. And it is precisely from there that these manuscripts come. Second reason: no one would use those manuscripts, even to make copies, because of the poor quality of the text, or they would have worn out. Those manuscripts were not used to produce other copies, to make other copies. So we say that they have no children. They were probably not copied because the text quality was not acceptable. And the manuscripts were written in Greek. Since in Egypt few people spoke Greek, a Greek manuscript would be of no use to an ordinary person. A person who tries to copy a text in a language that he does not know will predictable make many meaningless mistakes, which will make the copy virtually impossible to use. A manuscript like P66, which has an average of 2 errors per verse, is psychologically impossible to use. You can try to read a document with this number of errors to understand the problem. We have just clarified some known reasons that explains the preservation of older documents, but we also need to remember that in Egypt, in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, there were many types of heresy due mainly to the Gnostics. But why do we refuse to apply the logic of the first question? The logic that documents with a date closer to the original should be preferred just for that reason. The first argument is that the first documents were written and directed to the churches located in the Aegean region, in the vicinity of the northeast Mediterranean Sea. It is a very humid region, which would not allow these manuscripts to withstand the action of time. The second argument is that the demand for copies from the congregations would be immense. Using manuscripts to make copies would easily wear out those documents. Thus, only the text would be preserved, not the documents, not the manuscripts. The third argument is that everyone recognizes that the greatest efforts, the greatest attempts to corrupt the New Testament text took place in the first 2 centuries. Since the oldest manuscripts we have would be dated in the year 200 and the codices are from the 4th century, they all came after the damage was done. So their mere age does not guarantee good quality. If the logic of the river and its source were applied to the New Testament, it would be necessary to clarify that when the source of the river is contaminated, the farther from the source, the purer the water will be, since the action of the soil and the sun has the effect of purifying the water. So in the analogy they use, we would have to say that the farther from the source, the better. They therefore use the analogy created by themselves inappropriately. The fourth argument is that any simple annotation of any person's Bible text in any manuscript for unknown purpose could be placed in the best position for the definition of the original text, since the important thing is the date of the document, not the quality of the text. In summary, our conclusion to explain the survival of these old manuscripts is that the quality of the text was terrible, so they were not used, they were not copied, and they were preserved by climatic conditions of the hot and dry Egyptian desert sand. But it must be stated here that if you believe that God would preserve His inspired word until today, then there is only one way to choose, which is the Byzantine manuscripts. This is because the quality of the text of all oldest manuscripts, the Egyptian manuscripts, are so bad that it is impossible, it is impractical to guarantee a reconstruction of the original text. It will never be achieved. These manuscripts have so many errors, so many contradictions, that the word choice in the definition of the original text will be merely temporary, since it is totally subjective. This means that the word used in the reconstruction of the text depends entirely on the personal taste of the editor, and if his opinion changes, or if there is a change in the editors of the text, it will already change the choice of who will define the text. So even if they got to the original text, they have no way of knowing that they did. So if you believe that the oldest manuscripts are the best, the New Testament text is hopelessly lost. But I have excellent news. If you believe that the evidence of the overwhelming majority of manuscripts also must be analyzed without having to prefer the fewer older manuscripts, or having to prefer the evident contradictions that exist in the old manuscripts, this opens the door to the analysis of Families 35 manuscripts and finding the original text. And Dr. Pickering identified the original New Testament text in Family 35. We made a book and it is published. Thank you, and until the next video.